Okay, isn't it magnificent? Right, at this point, I'd like to bring in Kim Lowe. So, Kim is the chair of Brookwood Cemetery Society. That's a voluntary group dedicated to the preservation, the history, and the appreciation of this wonderful cemetery. Kim has been absolutely instrumental in making all of this happen. So, please show your appreciation as she says a few words. Kim.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all for coming today. Now, my living room floor can testify to how many times I have tried to write a small speech to say about this gentleman. So, and I didn't want to wax lyrical, so I'm going to use a few well-spoken words used many times and say that he was a man of the people and a man for the people. Now, I'd like to thank, on behalf of Brookwood Cemetery Society and on behalf of Brookwood Cemetery, the National Secular Society for, in some respects, sorry, I'm going to get wet up now, fulfilling a wish that I made to myself when I joined the society. And I saw his memorial minus its bust and wreath. And I often thought it would be lovely to get this restored. So thank you, National Secular Society, for coming to us and allowing us to help you restore this wonderful memorial today. And another thanks is to Mr. Alec Ryman, who was the sculptor. He and his team, I think, have done an absolutely wonderful job. So much so it's moved me to tears. So now, when we do our guided walks around the cemetery and we come to this spot and we talk about Bradlaugh and all that he has done for society, they can now actually see what he looks like. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Right, we had hoped that Brian Niblett, who was the author of the most recent biography of Charles Bradlaugh, Dare to Stand Alone, would be here this afternoon to read an account of the funeral that took place here. Unfortunately, he's not well enough to do so, so he has asked Bob Forder to do that for him. So Bob is a member of the NSS Council and with a very keen interest in secularist history. Bob has very much led on this project for the NSS, and along with Kim, as I say, has been instrumental in making this happen today. So again, please show your appreciation for Bob.
Yes, if we've provoked anyone's interest in Bradlaugh, extraordinary character, personality, politician, and couldn't we do with some more like him today?
Yes.
If I provoked your interest at all, then I would recommend Brian Niblett's biography. Brian is very elderly now, and when he retired as a barrister, he became fascinated by Bradlaugh, and Bradlaugh's skill and knowledge as a lawyer had particularly provoked his interest. And he wrote this wonderful book, and I think it's got has a lot of very short chapters, and one describes the funeral that took place here, and I'm going to read this to you. The day after her father's death, Hypatia, Bradlaugh's surviving daughter, published the notice of his funeral. She emphasised that in accordance with her father's wishes, there was to be no ceremonial, no speeches, and those attending were asked not to wear mourning. These wishes had been conveyed in Bradlaugh's will, which had also directed that my body shall be buried as cheaply as possible. Hypatia was faithful to this direction, arranging for him to be buried in one of the London Necropolis Company's earth-to-earth coffins made from papier-mâché and designed to decompose. On the lid was a brass plate with the inscription, Charles Bradlaugh, died January the 30th, 1891, aged 57. On Monday night, the coffin with the body in it rested in the mortuary of the London Necropolis Company by Waterloo Station and was transferred to Brookwood the next morning. Hypatia ordered a special train to leave Waterloo for Brookwood at 1:30. Long before that, the roads converging on the station were blocked by crowds intent on attending the funeral. More than 3,000 sought to travel by train, and the London and South Western Railway hastily added 2 extra trains, all 3 crowded to capacity. In the first train, Hypatia and her husband Arthur had their own compartment with Elizabeth Norman and Emma Bradlaugh, Bradlaugh's sisters. Labouchere, also a Northampton MP, arranged a saloon carriage for MPs. There were 17 in the carriage. One of them was David Lloyd George, 28 years old, who had been in Parliament a year and was fast gaining a reputation as a radical. John Morley arrived late, just managing to step aboard. Those travelling by train were joined by another 1,000 who made their way to Brookwood directly. This concourse of over 4,000 came from all parts of Britain. The cities in which Bradlaugh had repeatedly lectured, Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham, Leeds, Bradford, Sheffield, Newcastle, Plymouth, Bristol and Nottingham, were all represented. Branches of the National Secular Society and of radical liberal clubs all sent members. There was a contingent of miners from the north. This was a congregation of all classes, rich and poor, though the majority were hard-working men who were willing to travel hundreds of miles to pay their tribute. The army turned out in substantial numbers, including Bradlaugh's old regiment, the 7th Dragoon Guards, in splendid uniforms. It seemed that every Indian student in London attended, wishing to demonstrate their respect for the man who'd advocated their cause. Among these was Mohandas Gandhi, 22 years old, a law student at the Inner Temple. Highly visible were a large number from Northampton, wearing their rosettes of mauve, white and green. The 9th Marquis of Queensberry was there, a man whose view of the parliamentary oath had always been that it was an exercise in Christian tomfoolery. George Jacob Holyoake, now 74, who presided at Bradlaugh's first lecture 40 years before, was in attendance. A recent friend of Bradlaugh's, Walter Sickert, the young artist, was there with his wife, Ellen. It had been Hypatia's task to choose the 6 pallbearers, and the test she applied was loyalty to her father. She selected 4 men from Northampton. The 5th pallbearer was William Digby, the London agent of the Indian National Congress, who proved a dependable ally. The 6th was a choice between George Foote, now president of the National Secular Society, and John Robertson, and without hesitation, Hypatia had chosen Robertson. Robertson, unlike Foote, had been consistently devoted to her father. Foote was deeply offended, for as president of the National Secular Society, he expected to be a pallbearer, and when he arrived at the Brookwood mortuary to assume this position, was bewildered and annoyed. Annie Besant appeared at the funeral dressed completely in black with a heavy veil. She ignored the request that there were no trappings and suits of woe. She was conspicuous as the only one attending in mourning clothes. But she was used to being conspicuous. That was how she lived. She had never been seen in a veil before, but Bradlaugh had never died before. And this was the last occasion she could publicly express her grief. On that grey November day, bereft of sunshine, the pallbearers carried the coffin with Hypatia's laurel wreath on top from the mortuary to the prepared grave in unconsecrated ground. Hypatia took the place of chief mourner, but Foot, still confused at not being a pallbearer, attempted to walk directly behind the coffin as if he were its official escort. Annie would have none of it. She came forward and elbowed Foot out the way with more force than was necessary, exclaiming, "How dare you come between the daughter and the dead father?" Bradlaugh's grave was next to that of his daughter Alice, and close to the graves of his wife Susanna and his grandson Kenneth. Close by was the grave of Thomas Alsop, mentor of Bradlaugh's early years. The mound of earth at the graveside was hidden by a mass of more than 50 wreaths. The last wreath to be added was from the Northampton deputation and consisted of an arrangement of mauve violets, white lilies and green maidenhair. The message on it was 4 simple words: brave, honest, incorruptible, thorough. Amid the stillness of that afternoon and watched by the vast crowd, the coffin was slowly lowered into the grave. There was silence for this man whose sonorous stentorian voice had resounded throughout the halls, the lecture platforms, the political assemblies of Britain. Hypatia stood at the edge of the grave as the coffin was lowered. She did not bow her head but stood upright, glancing with dignity at the immense throng gathered to honour her father. There were some in that crowd who thought they saw in her face at that moment the features of her father, his firmness, his fortitude. The family stayed at the graveside a short while and then slowly made their way back to Brookwood station, allowing others to take their turn to view the coffin. The crowd, guided by marshals from the National Secular Society, filed one by one past the grave, many weeping, all with their private thoughts. One of his supporters from Northampton cried out, "Oh, Charlie, this is no place for you yet." Many threw their rosettes into the grave until the coffin was covered by a sea of Northampton colours. An hour later, when the crowd was gone and the light was fading, 4 men from Northampton came back to the grave to take one last look. There they found the grave diggers shoveling the mounds of earth back into the grave. These Northampton men took the spades from the grave diggers and did the work themselves. Thank you.
Okay, thanks to know, Keith. I'll invite you to lay a wreath on behalf of the National Secular Society.
Thank you.
And we're also delighted today to be joined by the Mayor of Woking, Liam Lyons. So Liam, would you like to lay a wreath on behalf of Woking Council?
Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Rosa and Ada Burch, who are laying some poses to demonstrate the continuing and perhaps growing relevance of Bradlaugh, Bradlaugh's struggles to current and future generations. Well done, thank you. Please, want to say a few words?
When I came here earlier to see this statue, which is very different, it's the original Victorian one, a replica of that, and such a faithful one. It was such an emotive moment to see it and to see the strength of it and how it conveyed Bradlaugh's enormous presence. And I hope it's had the same effect on all of you. So thank you again for coming. Sorry, one last point, and wasn't it lovely that our attempts to have the statue here were also pushing at an open door, and that was another lovely touch. So thank you, Kim.
Yeah, exactly. And on that note, I would like to say a few thank yous, particularly everyone at Brookwood Cemetery, Woking Council, Brookwood Cemetery Society for all their work in making this happen. Thanks also to Bob for your endeavours, and the entire NSS Council actually for giving this their backing, and the NSS staff team as well for making this happen today. Thanks also to Andrew Whitehead, who's here, who was kind enough to allow us to use his small-scale version of the original bust by the artist Francois Verheyden, so we could have this replica made. Thank you also to Ryman Leader, Sculpture Casters as well, who produced the bust for us. And finally, thanks to all of you. Thanks for coming out today, and thanks for giving so generously to the fundraiser. You've all collectively made this happen, so thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you all back at the chapel. Thank you.
The only person who hasn't been thanked, Stephen, is you.
As always.
Not quite. But anyway, you've been a moving force in all of this, and it's gone like clockwork, as always. Thank you for your enthusiasm and your efficiency, which is nothing less than we expect, but no less deserved for that. Thank you.
And feel free to take photos, and we'll see you back at the chapel in due course. Thank you.